Welcome to Mission Majjhima. Ajahn.
Ajahn.
So Ajahn, tell us about the Cūḻasāropama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 30.
So the Cūḻasāropama Sutta, the shorter discourse on the simile of the Heartwood, is very similar to the greater discourse on the simile of the Heartwood, which we just went over in Majjhima 29. And it's actually the exact simile in many ways that the Buddha gave in that simile. So, but to start with, it has a different beginning. So in that sutta, we have the Buddha just spontaneously, in response to Devadatta's actions and his schismatic behavior and his attachment to gain, honor, and praise, we have the Buddha giving this simile. Whereas in this sutta, the Buddha gives this simile and gives the talk in response to a Brahmin named Pingala, who comes to the Buddha with a different question. He brings up these 6 kind of characters which appear in different places throughout the canon and are oftentimes referred to as the 6 heretical teachers. So these other teachers, and Pingala begins his question by saying, Master Gotama, there are these recluses and Brahmins, each the head of an order, the head of a group, the teacher of a group, a well-known and famous founder of a sect regarded by many as a saint. Have they all had direct knowledge, as they claim, or have none of them had direct knowledge, or have some of them had direct knowledge and some not? So somewhat of a fractious question, and the Buddha says, just leave that aside, Pingala, and listen, I'll teach you the Dhamma, which is a really fascinating point. The Buddha is really invited to say how his teaching is better than these other teachers, about how he's greater than they are. But he doesn't do that at all. He just totally he responds to something else. Maybe what he's seeing in Pingala as being more actually prescient and important for the listener. So it's a particular skill of the Buddha to know an individual and what they need. But the simile that the Buddha gives is the same as the last sutta, where the Buddha says that suppose there was a person who is seeking heartwood, but they go into a forest and just only take away the branches and leaves, or the outer bark, or the inner bark, or the sapwood of a tree, and leave the heartwood. In the same way, someone might be inspired to live a holy life, to live the Dhamma, but then be satisfied with gain, honor, and praise. That's like the leaves and branches. Or with accomplishment and precepts. That's like someone who only takes away the outer bark. Or with accomplishment in samadhi or concentration. That's the inner bark. Or satisfied with knowledge and vision. That's the sapwood. And they don't seek for what is loftier and more refined than that. That's the drawback in each of these cases. Someone is not seeking and striving, putting forth effort for that which is more sublime than these inferior states in comparison to complete liberation, the true heartwood. The Buddha then says, what's more refined than knowledge and vision? And he goes through 9 successive abodes, viharas, specifically the 4 jhanas, the sphere of infinite space, the sphere of infinite consciousness, the sphere of nothingness, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, and the cessation of perception and feeling, which is equivalent. The attainment of that is equivalent to the attainment of awakening. So that is the heartwood, this unshakable deliverance, the akupa ceto vimutti. So a beautiful sutta, and Pingala is satisfied and delights and becomes a follower of the Buddha.
That's great.
Yeah. So Ajahn, is there anything you'd like to draw out of this sutta?
A few things. I think you mentioning the Buddha's response to Pingala is really important. And not just as a way of him responding to this particular, person, individual, but rather how he approached speaking about teachers of other sects in general. You're right, he's given this chance not just to elevate his own teaching, but also to really clearly classify each of these teachers as attained or not attained, right or wrong, in a way that certainly would get back to them and really affect the opinions of those around him. And you're right, instead of walking right into that, he steps back and says, put that aside and I'll teach you the Dhamma. And just as trusting this person to kind of, after hearing truth, to make their own judgments on that. And it's such a gentle and diplomatic way of approaching it. And Ajahn Thanissaro notes that the Buddha never criticized other teachers by name to laity. And really like noting that throughout the canon, that's an astounding kind of ethos to hold for a teacher. And I think it can really inform how we speak, because this does come up as like teachers we have faith in or those we don't. And how do you speak about that delicately, honoring uncertainty, honoring the fact that, you know, some people can really have their faith broken. And the Buddha did say, you know, different people create great demerit, one who praises a person not worthy of praise, and one who dispraises someone worthy of praise. So we don't want to be too glowing about our praise of someone we really have real doubts about. And just taking the Buddha's example here of, you know, if we are in a situation like that, sometimes I think it's okay to maybe not speak directly to an opinion of that exact teacher, although sometimes that's obviously necessary if there's real danger or you've seen something really problematic. But instead saying, you know, in my experience, these teachings are really helpful, these are less helpful. I'd be especially, you know, wary of this or that, or just speaking about the teachers you really have faith in, but just how we can navigate skillfully that realm of speaking about teachers in our lives and the lives of others. One other thing I might just bring out is the fact that, as with so many similes in the canon, this one has a multidimensionality you can miss at first. And so, for example, the leaves and twigs equated with gain, honor, and praise, labha, sakara, siloka, they're the most visible part of the tree, the most colorful. Similarly, gain, honor, and praise are the most visible part of a life to one looking externally, but also kind of the least valuable for carpentry. You know, that sila is the bark, it protects the holy life. And then you get into this realm of the inner bark, samadhi, and the sapwood, knowledge and vision. And that's where the nutrients are stored and also brought up into the tree. And similarly, like those aspects, samadhi and knowledge and vision, being real, where we get sustaining pleasure in the holy life. And then the heartwood, of course, being the core of the whole thing. Ajahn, what else would you draw out of this discourse?
How the Buddha is suggesting that people who have the loftiest goal for their lives, the unshakable, the akupa ceto vimutti, the Buddha is suggesting, don't settle for less. And there's a lot of New Age spirituality that just foregrounds the virtue of contentment. And contentment is also an extremely big part of Buddhist practice. The Buddha says, those qualities of which you may know, those which lead to contentment, not to discontent. This is the Dhamma, this is the Vinaya, this is the teacher's instruction. But he also says, speaking of himself, that he was fully content with material requisites of life, food, clothing, shelter, medicines, but was not content with the attainments that he already had. He was always looking to, is there something which is truly unshakable? And the Buddha is suggesting that we can do the same. And figuring out how to relate to that for ourselves, to not in a non-neurotic way. And one specific difference between this sutta and the last is how the person responds to the different levels of they've gotten something, they've gotten gain, honor, and praise, or accomplishment and precepts, etc. In the last sutta, the response was one becomes intoxicated with inferior attainments, falls into negligence, and being negligent lives in suffering. Whereas in this sutta, the refrain is, so one does not arouse energy, does not arouse desire to act. They make no effort for the realization of those other states that are higher and more sublime. They hang back and slacken. And there's another sutta where the Buddha encourages Ananda, thus you should train yourself, striving at what is more and more excellent, more and more refined. We will realize unexcelled release. And it's the same word as here. So we can train ourselves in an intelligent contentment and an intelligent, not full absolute contentment. And Ajahn, anything else you'd like to draw out?
I suppose just the crescendo at the end, which is absent from the previous sutta of the Buddha talking about the 9 different kind of attainments one can get through the 4 jhanas, the 4 formless, and the 9th attainment of the cessation of feeling and perception. But just to say that's a list of 9 will come up against a lot. And many will be familiar with the first 8, but that 9th, the cessation of feeling and perception, also known as Nirodha Samapatti, is unique in basically, apparently, being accessible only to non-returners and arahants. So it's a taste of enlightenment, basically. Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is Sara. Sara means explicitly the heartwood, but it also means the essence, the pith, the substance of something.
So if people would like to join us for Zoom, we'll be going over about now. And otherwise, we'll see you next week for Majjhima Nikaya 31. Ajahn.